Why do we do the things we do? The answer to that question depends on the context and when we ask it. I think about when I was in seventh grade, winter break. My dad brought home our first family computer, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I had zero interest in computer technology. I also recall that I had a report that I had to type that winter break, and at one point, as my dad was helping me revise it, he suggested moving a couple of paragraphs around. And as I looked at my typed manuscript and looked at the electronic typewriter I had, I realized this was impossible. I'd have to start from scratch and do everything over again. At that point, my dad said, "Walk away for about 20 minutes and come back and I'll show you something." And when I did, he showed me how he could move blocks of text from one part of the screen to another. And at that point, I realized I could do something faster and more efficiently by using a computer. And I was sold. You know, in education, there are so many influences that are pushing and pulling us in terms of making decisions daily. State, district, site requirements, grade level expectations or department procedures, parents and administration, they all influence the decisions that we make daily. When I think about my first teaching job, it was a seventh grade job in a small single school district in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. I wasn't really thinking about why do we do things in our education system at that point. I was too busy being terrified and thinking about what do I do for a full day with a full class. The questions I asked at that point in my career were more like, what do I do right now? Or what do I do next? For inspiration, I thought about the teachers who I knew as a kid, who I loved the most. And one of those teachers that came to mind was Mrs. Adams. She was my seventh grade English teacher, and I loved diagramming sentences with her. It was a puzzle. It was a critical thinking exercise. And I know most students hated it. And I know it didn't really help me write a better sentence or paragraph or essay, but it did help me a lot with Mad Libs, another thing that she did that I loved. My early years of teaching then really turned into mimicking the teachers that I loved the most. I never intended to become a teacher who used media with students. It just wasn't even on my radar. I did do sentence diagramming, and most students hated it, and some students liked it, and I'm pretty sure that nobody became a better writer because of it. But it did help them with the Mad Libs that we used as well. During my first 10 years of teaching, I did cover a lot of material, and I used calendars and pacing guides and frameworks and standards to help with decisions that I made every single day. But after a few years of teaching like that, I learned something important. When I looked past the standards and the mandates and the requirements, I realized that focusing on why I teach something as compared to what I cover, it's made me a better educator. I started teaching differently in 2006. This is when I turned to project-based learning as a way of designing instruction. Learning takes place within the context of a big project. A driving question governs the daily work. And ultimately, designing teaching and learning experiences starts with why. The content, the skills that we teach are all corresponding to the project and in service to the project. Let me share with you a couple projects that we've worked on and the media that we've used to build those out. The first really big project we worked on was a civic education project, and the question we asked was, how can we build a new running track in an old school? Our school had been given about $100,000 to use for PE supplies and equipment, and we wanted to build a track, but the state of California said no, and we had no understanding why. Research led to a very in-depth study of state laws and wording, and what we ultimately built was a PowerPoint and an oral presentation which suggested a solution that we'd uncovered by talking to state legislators and Senate budget analysts. Trade categorical for non-categorical funds. And my students actually knew what these words meant. Ultimately, we were shot down. We presented this to the superintendent and to our budget director, and they said no. But when students said they were going to go ahead and take this oral presentation and PowerPoint slideshow to the next board meeting, something strange happened. About a day and a half after that, the decision was reversed. Our leadership at our district approved not only one, but 17 tracks at 17 old schools, redirecting bond funds. And it was an amazing experience. And the big takeaway we had was this: media that students use is only as strong as the message. A simple slide deck and oral presentation was enough to change the hearts and minds of adult leaders. The second thing I learned was that informed and empowered youth can intimidate adult leaders in a court of public opinion. Another project we worked on was dealing with water cycle science, and we were looking at how can we reduce improper battery disposal. Students had learned that less than 1% of batteries were recycled properly, and that recycling batteries could help protect our groundwater sources. We did research, and students created an oral presentation and a big poster board, and they presented their information to the city's waste and recycling division. The idea was, let's install battery collection stations at our 42 elementary, 9 middle, and 9 high schools. And the outcome? Well, we got shot down again. The city said that the risk of battery fires was too great in schools, which makes sense. But they did offer us a consolation solution, which was, would we be interested in creating educational films for our city of 170,000 people plus to educate them on how to dispose of recycling and household hazardous waste and things like that? And the answer was yes, we did. So now I realize from that experience that I look to my community for inspiration. What issues in our community can students engage with, which facilitates real-world inquiry and ultimately leads to media projects that can help make the world a better place? Final project that I'd like to share with you is about our marine debris project. And we were looking at marine debris and the idea of sustainability. And ultimately, the question that we asked was, how can we reduce marine debris entering our oceans? Now, this project was inspired by a reading of a novel called A Long Walk to Water by Linda Sue Park. Students wanted to understand how accessible water was in our community, and we turned to some new tools that we'd never used before. Esri's Survey 123 and Story Maps and Esri Maps. Students mapped where water was in our location. And what they found was water is highly accessible in a suburban community like Elk Grove as compared to South Sudan. But one thing we didn't find was any reusable water bottle filling stations. Students met with school district officials and proposed with an oral presentation and a slide presentation and the map that they built that all schools have water bottle filling stations in order to reduce the amount of single-use plastic bottles that are used. The school district told us, we do that now. We didn't know. But when we met with our Parks and Rec officials, we have 100 parks in our community. The Park and Recs officials listened to the presentation, took it under consideration, and they committed to installing reusable water bottle filling stations at all new parks and replacing old drinking fountains as they wore out with new fountains that included reusable water bottle filling stations. The media we used was Survey 123 and Story Maps and Esri Maps, and we even used a Google Sheet because we surveyed over 500 kids about their water drinking habits to see if they'd actually want a reusable water bottle filling station. Ultimately, my takeaway was that media changes over time. The creation of a map helped us tell a story, how accessible water was, but how inaccessible sustainable water sources like reusable water bottle filling stations were. To wrap things up, I would offer this: why we teach is more important than what we teach. If we can work as educators to help develop civic-minded students, that's a much greater win than students who have learned something and forgotten it. Do we really want to build students who build 5-paragraph essays? Or do we want to work with students who are able to create maybe a series of Instagram posts, like those from the Coyote Project, exposing things like wildlife killing contests? Social media is a powerful tool, and if students know how to communicate and use media effectively, they can use that tool. Do we want to work to help create students who are able to write a scientific report? Or do we want to work with students and develop their skills so that they maybe create a podcast like The Plastosphere, which explores the costs and benefits and stories related to plastic production, consumption, and disposal. I've learned that really to embrace media as a tool, I need to make sure that media remains in service to the purpose larger than, say, standards or mandates that come and go. I like to think about the motto of National Geographic Education, and it's really become a beacon for me when I think about what I do and why I do it. Ultimately, when you think about media and education and change over time, if hip hop and history can combine to create a Broadway sensation like Hamilton that both informs and inspires and entertains, well, that should be a signal to all of us that we have to be highly strategic when making choices related to curriculum and instruction and pedagogy and the use of media. Content covered and forgotten, it just doesn't count. And education, it can't just be about completed clock hours and credits. My instructional choices now that I make, my use of media with students, it's evolved, and I no longer fear filling a day with instruction. I fear not having enough time to do all the things necessary. Now, as I plan projects and instruction, I no longer find myself asking, what do I do right now? Or what do I do next? It's more like I ask, how can I, along with others in my community, help cultivate informed and empowered students able to use storytelling and media to help make the world a better place? And I still try to sneak in a few sentence diagramming and Mad Lib moments too. Thank you for your time.